Greetings, Kerbinauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 37 of Project Odyssey. And at the end of the last episode, we were launching this capture vessel that was going to go and get the return vessel coming from Jool with Hadfield's medicine. Unfortunately, it started going out of control. But fortunately, it flipped around and went right back onto its prograde vector and just kept going up with no problems. So we're going to continue with this launch. This is a real launch. The simulated launch that was before this was perfectly fine. So this one was deemed the true launch, and therefore if that thing really had flipped out of control and we'd lost it, we'd be losing a whole lot of fuel that we need right now. Later in this episode, we'll hopefully make a little bit more progress on getting our moon refueling base set up. There goes the fairing, and inside there you can see the little space tug I was talking about that will grab the Jool return craft and redock it up to the larger stage that is just beneath it. The core stage is just about to run out of fuel, so let's go take a look at the other half of this mission. This one had also been launched last episode. This is a transfer stage. A standard transfer stage with the 3 nuclear engines and lots of hydrogen. Truth be told, this was actually launched second. The first one was the one that we started this episode with. Once it was all the way up in orbit, then I launched this one here. Another thing we still had going was the module up at the space station. We had decoupled the second half of it after the first half had docked, and we were going to move it into position using the space tug you can see down on the end of it at the bottom of the screen. After flipping it over and doing a little reversing, we'll bring it down and dock it underneath the rest of the station. It has a really awesome 360-degree observatory down there on that. And by putting it down under the station, that should hopefully provide a really good view all around the planet and out to all the different parts of the station at the same time. The module we're docking has a crew capacity of 11. This entire mission is bringing up a crew capacity of 23, and docked to the station, the whole place now is a total of 51. Since there are 3 Kerbals on board, and I'd like to have that 20 times, that means 60, so we're only 9 crew capacity short from being at the number that I was hoping to have. That's pretty close, and I'd say that for now there's enough room out there that they should be able to go about their business, and if they get a little space crazy, we can just bring them back down and send up a different crew. I'll just move the space tug back over to some other docking port to keep it out of the way of where new things might want to come in. If I had a spaceship that I was bringing up here with new crew or supplies, I might want it down on the end of that new module because it extends so far down from the station, it'll be easy to dock to right there. If you're wondering how I came up with that 20 times crew capacity number, well, I looked at the ISS and it has 916 cubic meters of internal pressurized living space volume, and I took a guess at the size of a Kerbal and how much space each one would want. Figured that the ISS was pretty typically about 6 people, so divide the 916 by 6, and that gave me cubic meters, and scaled that down to Kerbal size, and then took a guess at what a crew capacity size was in KSP, and ultimately decided that 20 times that is how much they'd want to have to be comparable to the ISS. And with that, the station mission is done. We can move back out now to check on the resupply mission that's heading to Svetlana's craft. Svetlana and Neil are getting ready to go over to the moon so that they can go and rescue Hadfield when his wormhole opens. When we last left off with this mission, we were on a suborbital trajectory, but we did have our close approach, so just a little bit of fast forwarding along here until Svetlana's Hydra capsule catches up with us, and then we can begin our burn. And for whatever reason, sometimes I really like to watch the orbits match up again, especially when there are a bunch of colors out there. Green, red, close approach, teal color for our orbit, and then seeing them all come together. And once they're together, then seeing how close we can get the close approach markers to us. Once they're close to us, that means that we're at that position, and it's time to decouple our payload and start our shift over to the other vessel. We'll come back to that because it's also time to check in with the transfer lifter. The transfer lifter heading over right now. to the other vessel we'd already launched that was going to help capture the Jool return mission. The transfer lifter still has the lower stage attached to the transfer section itself, still heading up to the proper altitude. Even once we get this one matched up with the other and docked to it, I don't think that's going to be the end of this recapture. It's hard to imagine that this very long vessel with small docking ports between won't be unstable, so I think I'll send up somebody to just do a quick strutting of everything together. We'll flip our solar panels to make sure that they are facing toward the sun, get around to our periapsis, and then finish off that orbit. This is a rendezvous mission because the other craft is already up there. You might remember that from last episode as well. It was this really long one that has, at this point in time, just started making it into its orbit. This one turned out to be quite the pain because I was having some difficulties with KSP and recognizing some of the models. Inside the fairing, you should be able to see my heat shield for the return, but it's not showing up. I realized it after I got it up into orbit here, so I went back into the config files and tried to figure out what was going on. It's showing up as some little white platform. That turned out to be a typo in one of the config files. It was referencing the wrong model. One of the things that can happen when you're making all your own parts and setting all your own models. So I went in, and after about an hour and a half of trying to fiddle with that and figure it out, I got that all fixed up, reloaded the game, and you can see now that the heat shield is showing up correctly. And that allowed me to go back and finish this rendezvous after transferring the hydrazine to make sure that I keep it in the stage where I need it here that's decoupling. This is the stage that's supposed to go and attach to the other larger one. There's a little bit of discontinuity in the timelines here because technically this is where the problem was really noticed with the heat shield, just as I was coming closer for my rendezvous. So I had to save it there, go do the fixing, then come back again, but the two parts had separated, so I had to readjust them again, almost like rendezvousing twice, really. So right here is the second discontinuity. Now we have the two proper parts getting themselves lined up for the one true final docking. Oh boy, that was a challenge. And of course, it's not even done yet since we have to send somebody up there for that EVA finish off of the construction of this thing. Maybe Joseph will be interested in doing that. But in any case, we have one less mission out there that we have to worry about. That'll allow us to go back over here and take a look again at the refueling craft that's going to Svetlana's vessel. Once that gets docked up, it can start transferring over some of the fuel to her vessel. We'll also use as much as we can out of the stages that are on this. Normally, this would be able to use its frigate-style booster at the bottom here to put itself either on a trajectory to go to a moon or to intercept with the space station. We're going to use it to boost our orbit a little bit toward the moon. With it attached to the rest of the craft, it won't get quite the same delta V that it would get if it were just the supplies inside the supply craft, but it's better than nothing, and I haven't done the math to make sure that we even have enough for this. Once again, doing a little bit of the flying by the seat of the pants style of KSP. I threw a lot on here. That's all I really know. I'm hoping that by my guessing at it, and guessing that I've put a lot, that I'll even have some left over, but we won't really know until it has come time to make all of the transfers and see what really happens. So here we go. It's easing itself into place using the main engine on the frigate-style booster there to get itself aligned and to provide that forward propulsion, pushing it into place, docking it up, and then starting that fuel transfer that I talked about earlier. After that, we will flip the craft around to get ready for its maneuver node on the far side. That maneuver node is lined up with the moon. You can see that we're trying to do an initial boost with just the frigate, then we'll release that, we'll come back around again, and after one more orbit around Kerbin, we'll use up all of the fuel out of the ATV style craft, and then we'll decouple that. perhaps one more orbit again, then we'll activate the main engines to boost ourselves all the way over to the moon. We've moved on to the ATV engines. They're fairly weak trying to push something this massive. I'll move some of the fuel out of that stage so that we can get rid of it as soon as possible. You can see with the playback going at 8 times normal speed, it's still showing very slow progress on the orbit. It's also a little unstable. I keep needing to adjust it to make it stay on course, giving even more reason why we should make sure that we're maintaining all of the balance in the larger section of the craft that we're going to keep transferring out with the TAC fuel balancer, keep transferring out all of the fuel into the other sections, allowing me to get rid of that ATV as soon as possible, and then go check in on the Jool scoop as it's returning from Jool, allowing it to fast forward a bit until it re-intercepts with Kerbin's SOI. And then, because it still has 500 liters of fuel, well, 1,000 liters if you consider the oxidizer, still on board that, we can use that fuel to adjust the trajectory of its incoming course here, make it intercept the orbit of the capture vessel that's already around Kerbin. We have several hours before we need to deal with this, though. While we wait for that, let's check in with Svetlana and Neil. You know we had been doing our burn here with that ATV and gotten rid of it by now. We were waiting to come around to the periapsis to make the burn over to Moon, so in that time we can decouple our Hydra from the rest of the craft, flip it around for the transfer over to Moon, and dock it up to the lander that we have down inside that fairing. Normally a trip over to the moon ought to take about 860 delta V, but because we've already used some from the ATV craft that's been decoupled, and before that from the sort of frigate little booster that we had attached, I'm suspecting that it should not cost us more than 500 to 600 delta V. And if we can get ourselves really close to the surface of the moon when we make our transfer, then I suspect the capture isn't going to cost very much as well. The target vessel is already in a low orbit, so we'll see what we can do to perhaps intercept the target vessel at the same time that we're making our capture. And when we get to that, I'll show you how that's going to happen. At the moment, we're waiting for the docking to finish, and while we get a chance to look at it right here, all I have to say is our little Kerbal engineers have outdone themselves. Look at how gorgeous that thing was. Alright, so here's a guess at the initial Kerbin orbit ejection that I'm going to be making. I place the maneuver at the periapsis where we had previously burned, and this is where we'll wait to come around and do a second burn, finally making it all the way over there. Oh, it's getting exciting now. I can just sense the excitement in Svetlana and Neil thinking about their burn, preparing to go to full power on the engines, knowing that on the other side, in just a couple days, Hadfield will be returned to their group, and after that we just need to find a way to get Bill back, and the band will be together again. That actually makes me wonder, what do they do for entertainment? Do they actually have a band? Do they play instruments? Do Kerbals at all play instruments? Well, anyway, the burn is well underway at this point. Almost there. There's the intercept. Have to scroll in a little closer to see where the trajectory is. Get it down a little bit. Keep going. Come on. A little bit more. There we go. About 7 kilometers from the surface. That should be perfect. Oh, and hey, look. We're moving past the moon in such a way that it's increasing our velocity, like that gravity slingshot maneuver I told you about. If we had used this for a slingshot, it would stick us way out here, partway to Duna. Our trip is now well underway. Svetlana and Neil are settling into their capsule, and that gets me thinking, what do they do for fun? We know they have TV shows. We saw them watching one in a previous episode of mine. Maybe they just sit around when they're off duty watching Wormhole Extreme all the time. If you don't know what that is, it's a Kerbal TV show about 4 explorers who keep going into wormholes that take them around the universe, where they face adventures and then come back again for a new adventure the following week. You can see here the ground base we're targeting. Here's where the ECLSS lander is right now, currently circling around in this direction, continuing to pass over our moon base over and over again. Our intercept from Kerbin with Svetlana's ship with Neil on board is going to come through here. We just set that up. If we look at it from the side, you're going to see where the two lines cross. Here's the orbit of our target right here. Here is the orbit that we'd be on during our intercept. Right about there when they cross, which is pretty close to our periapsis, so also a good spot to do our retro burn. We can do our capture at the same time that we do our retrograde capture. Let me set that up until it gets captured first of all. So there we go. Alright, so now we would have a capture, but I want to adjust the inclination to match our target as well. So we'll pull down on this, and that is changing that right there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to get this down fairly low, but I don't want to completely capture, because if you watch the close approach markers here and here, it's going to show where we're going to be coming in contact. Notice how it keeps going around and around and around as I get closer. Well, I'm going to keep doing that until our orbit is pretty far down close to the surface of the moon, but at the same time with the close approaches near each other as well. We'll just speed this up to 4 times normal. At the same time, I'll want to come down here to make sure that the inclination is still staying fairly matched up, and it looks like it is, so we can continue with pulling back on the retro and watching the close approach get closer. And 10 times normal speed here. There we go. Fairly low down around the surface, but at the same time, very close to intercepting. We can adjust that a little bit more and get it closer. I'll do that now. But since it's probably going to require a little bit of fiddling for a couple minutes to get it really super close, I'm just going to fast forward past that part. Alright, so it's down to less than 2 kilometers at the moment. That's not going to be the real intercept once we get here, of course. After I enter into the SOI and get close to this location, I'll be aiming at that maneuver node, but I won't really be burning watching the maneuver node. I'm going to be burning watching my close approach. So in reality, I'll be looking at the real values, not at how much delta V I'm going to need, or how long the node is supposed to burn for, which here you can see it says 20 seconds, but it's going to be much longer than that because I will most likely burn at only 50% of my throttle to make sure that I can fine-tune it better. As we wait to approach the moon's SOI, we'll look in on some other mission and see how we're doing elsewhere.
Kranz, I got your message. What happened?
Oh, it was just a minor spill in the lab. I got a chemical burn. It doesn't seem very serious, but I need help with the temporary doctor.
Oh, you mean with Neil being away, you want me to activate the medical hologram?
Yes. Please state the nature of the medical emergency. Ah, thanks. So, Joseph's launch is ready, right?
Yep, he's on the pad now and ready to launch immediately. The window opens in a few minutes.
Well, then that must be what we're looking at right here. We're watching as KSC has the orbit of that other ship coming right over, and as it's crossing the horizon behind us there, and remember this is a retrograde orbit, that's why it was coming from the opposite direction there, and that's why we're going to fly opposite. Normally you'd fly up and over the ocean. We're going to go backward up and over the space center here. This flight is a little wigglier than I remember. Normally my Hydra I thought was fairly stable, but it was kind of a wiggly little launch right there. I'm wondering if maybe there isn't something going on with the physics. If you notice in the upper left hand corner, my physics time index is in yellow. And when it's yellow, that indicates that it's slipping frames.
When it's red, it's slipping lots of frames. Yellow isn't quite so bad, but I wonder if the last time I launched my Hydra it wasn't green. And if that's the case, then I'm kind of wondering what's going on to slow things down. I may want to take a look at that. But for now, we'll just continue as it is, because even though it's a wiggly flight, Neil is managing to make it into orbit relatively fine. The other thing I'm trying to remember about the last time that I flew my Hydra is whether I had last time gone a little bit more straight up on the solid rocket booster before decoupling it, rather than taking quite the normal gravity turn that you would do, because once I had decoupled it, I noticed that my thrust to weight ratio was fairly low. So is it that my thrust to weight is supposed to be low and I expect it to be higher up? Or have I done something to my game where I've changed masses? So it was a little tricky, a little dangerous getting it up there. It also meant that we were behind our target more than I had expected we would be. We also had to start using the fuel from what normally would be our maneuvering and return vessel. But as long as I'm not going far away from Kerbin, which I'm not, we'll probably be okay. So just open up those solar panels there and come in. We'll stay low in a lower orbit since we're now behind our target, and that will allow us to go faster. And once I get closer, then we can make our rendezvous. So it's not going to be that long. We didn't pack a lot of snacks on this trip, but I believe we've packed enough snacks that we should be able to get there, do the orbital construction on that vessel, and get back again before we come anywhere near dangerously close to running out of snacks. Joseph's been working on a new snack. He's going to experiment with it on this trip, see how nutritious and tasty it is. See, he found around KSC the other day some local plants, a couple plants. One of them has these little berries and the other one has these seed pods. And when he breaks down the berries and he melts them, he gets this really tasty, sugary, brown sort of syrup that when it cools, it solidifies into some nice crunchy chunks. And then there's the pods that when they break open have sort of like seed-like things inside, and you crush those up and mix them with some other stuff and turn it into a paste, sort of like a butter. And then when you mix those two together, two great tastes that taste great together. But for now, he has put the snacks aside as we've gone out on our EVA to head over to that craft, the one we had docked earlier. See those two little bits right there, those docking nodes, and the little itty bitty piece in between just doesn't seem, or I knew ahead of time that it didn't seem like that was going to be enough to keep that stable. So I was thinking that to make it more stable, I would just have somebody come up here like Joseph and do a little EVA strutting of it using Kerbal attachment system. The alternative was going to be to use much larger docking nodes, which would have increased the mass of everything. And I didn't want to do that, or to try to find some other way where maybe I could dock the two larger ships together, but put that little space tug in between somewhere else. And that just seemed like a potential engineering nightmare as well. So hopefully this will be enough. Maybe I'll have to throttle only up to 50% or something, at least until one of those two stages has been depleted of its fuel. And then after that, we'll be able to decouple it and things will be much more stable. Then we can go to full power, or it's entirely possible we'll be able to go to full power right from the beginning. I don't know because I haven't tried it out yet, but we'll see soon. Anyway, everything is looking all strutted up and solid, so we'll head back to our capsule in preparation for returning to Kerbin, and then go check in with Svetlana and Neil, who are on their way to go rescue Hadfield, as well as drop off the lander for Svetlana to go and finish up the moon base. We just need to reorient ourselves so that when we do get to the right position around the moon here, we can start that retrograde burn and capture our orbit. We'll be trying to match up with two things at the same time here. So a lot of planning went into this. We're trying to match up with the orbit of the vessel we need to refuel, the one that in a previous episode ran out and we only got it as far as around the moon, and then we needed to refuel it, but we have enough on our craft to transfer some over. And the other thing is we do need to be lined up with where Hadfield is going to come through his wormhole. With our higher detection capabilities and detecting the timing of everything, we believe that we have it all set up that we'll be able to grab him as well as do the refueling and do our landing all within something like an hour Right here you can see that we are slowly bringing down the orbit, and watch that close approach going around and around the planet several times until we get really close on the time when the orbit is going to be quite low around the moon, and I don't want it to go any lower because I might actually start to deorbit if I did that. So this will be the one where we capture. We'll stop here right as we were flying over the moon base, in fact, and then just wait for Hadfield. Back around Kerbin, since Joseph was all done strutting up that Jool return craft capture vessel, it's time for him to head back home. And actually, this is going to be the very first time that this capsule gets tested for re-entry. Lucky Joseph. We're aiming to land right near the KSP Space Center. Using the trajectories mod is supposed to make this relatively simple. I just go retro here until that X that you can see down on the surface backs up all the way to being right over the Space Center, and at that point, that's supposedly where we're going to come down. We'll find out soon whether that's the case. After flipping over and decoupling the service module, now we can just reorient the capsule so that it's heat shield first, and begin our re-entry. And remember, in a previous episode, we had done a lot of work to make sure that this was aerodynamically sound for its re-entry, because it was having some problems with Ferrum Aerospace. Turned out to be that that cargo bay down below needed to be marked in Ferrum Aerospace as a cargo bay, and once it was, then it was staying the direction I really wanted it to go. You can see the service module down there beginning to explode, and a few unexpected explosions on our return capsule. Not quite sure what's going on. Taking a look around the outside of it, it looks like nothing's being destroyed. We should be able to pop up the F3 mission status window to take a look at whatever was destroyed right there, but I'll do that after I land and we're in the water. For now, we'll just pop open those parachutes and start down toward the ocean. Notice that we did not come down where the X was indicating. So for future reference, next time we're doing a landing, I'm going to have to land, whoa-oh, and right there we crashed. I was going to say we're going to have to tell it that we want to land further on, but I guess that's what's going to happen right now. Because of the game crashing right there, my save point was still up in orbit, so I had to start over again, but I guess that means this time I can put the X far beyond the Space Center, and then hopefully come down closer to the Space Center. Another thing I did differently was give a little torque to the whole craft, so that when I decoupled the service module, it would continue on all by itself without me needing to apply much RCS, and also my spin allowed me to keep spinning until I was aiming the right way. So those couple changes have definitely improved this particular re-entry attempt. It's also another opportunity to watch as things explode. And because I know last time there was the problem with the game crashing, just in case it happens again, I hit the F3 status window to take a look at it and see what it was that was falling off. And I guess maybe it was some lights or something, so no real big deal. Alright, so the way that this is supposed to land is it has little legs that I can activate, little landing gear thing. Those legs come out, and then as we get closer to the ground, we'll still be going maybe about 7 meters per second as we get close to landing, at which point there are some engines on the bottom that I plan to activate, and those will bring us down at 1 meter per second for a very slow landing. Or at least that's the theory. What really happens is as I get close to the ground, for no explainable reason, it picks up speed as if there are no parachutes attached anymore and just goes down and slams the ground really hard. Fortunately, Joseph survived. Now take a look at this one more time. Watch right here. The engines are pointed toward the ground, and yet when I activate them, we speed up rather than slow down. That will take some investigating. But that will be in the next episode, because just as Hadfield comes in through the wormhole and arrives at the moon, it is time for us to end. Until next time, I will see you later, Kerbinauts.